There's an overwhelming amount of financial advice in the news and on social media. Who do you listen to? Are they looking out for what's best for you? How do you tune out the noise? In this podcast, trusted advisors Emily Agosto, CPA, and Amanda Vaught, JD, bring their extensive education and experience to delve into all aspects of personal finance. Emily and Amanda make topics like investing, taxes, and financial planning interesting and accessible, and they provide a framework to help you think through the plethora of financial advice and news out there. Are you ready to start making the best personal financial decisions for you? Welcome to Connecting the Dollars with Propel Financial Advisors.
Welcome back, everyone, to our latest episode of Connecting the Dollars. Today, we are joined by our fellow advisor, Danielle Woods. Danielle has been practicing as a financial advisor for ages, decades.
Almost 26 years.
26, wow. She has a ton of experience and loves working with the clients, and I think we can really learn a lot from her. Today, we are going to go through 5 of the recurring themes she sees with clients over and over and over again. And so let's just jump right in, Danielle.
Right.
So you want to start with our first one?
Sure. Do you want me to talk, or are you gonna?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think, the first one, we're talking about thinking of things as a whole rather than as individual parts. I think some clients, they can sort of get lost in the weeds and not see the larger picture.
Yeah. I think, and that's why it's so important to have an advisor who actually knows you, because every client is different. We've got clients who range, if you want to have like a meter of financial anxiety, there are people who never think about it at all, and people who think about it too much, and they stress, and I've got clients who tell me they can't go to sleep at night, and that makes me sad because I feel like I'm not doing my job. My job is to help them not feel that way. And I think as advisors, part of the reason we're in this is our personalities are that we like puzzles, and we like to solve problems and make order out of these things. And I understand that it's overwhelming for people who don't do this for a living, which is why there are people like us who do this for a living. And so when Amanda and I were talking about items we wanted to think about today, we were saying, kind of the 5 do's of personal finance, and financial education and financial literacy and financial freedom and all of those buzzwords. And I'm usually motivated by or inspired by recent conversations I've had with clients. And I probably talk to at least 6 clients a day. So I'm getting feedback all the time and things from, obviously we look at things very different than clients do. And I had a conversation with a client recently, and we've been working with them for some time. I know all about their portfolio and their personalities and their goals and all that. And he recently rolled over. He started a new job about a year ago and rolled over his 401k to an IRA, and that was new for him. He'd been at that job for a really long time. So it was the first time he'd ever actually rolled out a large account to an IRA. And he said, well, what about that? Like, do we add to it? Like, how do I add to that? Or what's it doing? And that particular client, like most of our clients, has multiple types of accounts. And I had to remind him that your financial portfolio is made up of all of these accounts. And the reason they're in different accounts is because accounts have different tax rules. And it's truly just a tax structure issue. And those are the decisions that we're here to help you make, is where to make deposits that will be most tax efficient. And for this particular client, that IRA account that's rolled over from a 401k is all pre-tax. It means they've never paid taxes on it before. And that's great in the current tax year. You've lowered your taxes, but long term, is it where you want to be? And in that client's defense, and he said to me, like I think 2 years ago, we really got talking about Roths and how important it was to add them to the portfolio. And he was very frustrated. He said he felt like he had done something wrong. Like he'd been told for years and years and years to put as much money in your 401k as you can. And now he feels like he's being told that that was the wrong thing to do. And it's not. It wasn't the wrong thing to do. It's what everyone did. And because Roths were still kind of new, they're only, what,
Yeah.
25 years old, which isn't that long. For many people, that's as long as they've ever been working. And, when something new comes out, people are sort of hesitant. They don't really know what they mean. A lot of advisors, a lot of people didn't have advisors. There was a time, and we're sort of unique in this industry, that we don't have minimums. We're happy to work with any client who is willing to be proactive and wants to learn and wants to save. And a lot of firms won't, they won't take an account that's less than $1 million. So a lot of folks out there were just sort of on their own, and didn't know what to do, and just did what was easiest or what was put in front of them. And they thought, well, that must be the right thing to do. Um, and so there's nothing wrong with it. Because of that, we have a whole generation of workers who have been saving almost entirely pre-tax. And that has become a problem, most specifically in the last 4 years, when Congress passed the Secure Act 1.0, that said all of this IRA money that you've been saving without paying taxes on, whenever you pass that along to your beneficiaries, which is often, folks' goal when they don't think they're going to spend it all, is that there's a huge tax markup on it now that didn't used to be there. And that got all of us RIAs scrambling about what we could do to help our clients be more tax efficient going forward. And the positive is it's made people a lot more proactive, which is always necessary. People always need to know what they're doing. But back to the original question of looking at your financial picture as a whole, this client was asking specifically about his IRA, and I said, no, and we've had this conversation before, but we're adding to your brokerage account because they had very little taxable savings. So if they wanted to take money out or had some huge emergency, they would have had to go into their IRA, which meant big taxes. You have to pay taxes on everything you take out. And the other type of account that we've been adding to is at his new job, he has a Roth 401k for the first time. So we're contributing to his Roth 401k instead of the IRA, because so much of their retirement is there. So it's all part of one thing. Like, I know they also have CDs and they have some other things. And so when it comes to making decisions for a client, I'm not thinking about your IRA, and Amanda's not just thinking about, that taxable account. We're thinking about all of them together at the same time. And that's what we get paid to do, because it is easy for clients to fixate on one portion of that financial plan and worry about that. And so I reminded him, we're not adding to that. It doesn't make sense for you to add to that. There's no tax benefit to that. Well, there is one, but you can't contribute to an IRA when you're making the kind of money he's making. You can't deduct it. I'm not going to go into the weeds, but it doesn't make sense to use that account anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And
But
I
in the
think
meantime,
sometimes,
it's invested and it's still growing. It's not like it's not doing anything. He just felt like because he wasn't physically putting money into it, that he was remiss in something in his plan, and he's not at all.
yeah. 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 And I think some people have this understanding that because it's called a retirement account, those funds have to be used for retirement,
Mhm.
which is not necessarily the case, right? And a brokerage account isn't called a retirement account, but that doesn't mean you can't use it for retirement.
Right.
And so you don't have to silo those things,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
And then did you want to touch on the balancing debt versus the savings as part of this big
Yeah.
picture look at
You know,
finances?
yeah, aside from just the types of accounts or the amount of money you're contributing to different accounts, the other part of your financial plan is your net assets, and that's made up of your assets minus your liabilities. And we have some folks who are very focused on either the assets, they're squirreling away tons of money, but they're like letting their debt pile up, or it's the opposite. They're freaking out about paying off their house. That's a huge one I'm hearing about all the time. Or,
Mhm.
their student loan or whatever debt they have, credit cards, and they're completely ignoring the asset growth. And you really need a balance. A lot of times clients will call me and be like, it's a psychological need to pay off their house. And I get that. I understand that it feels good to pay off your house. But when you call me up and tell me that you have a 2.75% mortgage for $60,000, and you've only saved $80,000 in your IRA and you're 40, I'm much more concerned about your retirement savings than I am about touching that mortgage. And so we often will come up with a plan of, it's never all or nothing. I get that a lot. Like, I inherited money. I'm getting that a lot now too. A lot of people are inheriting money. I just
Mhm.
inherited 50,000, 100,000, 200,000, and I want to pay off my house. And I'm like, hang on. First of all, we have to look at the tax consequences of that. Where and what form is that money coming from? Or did you inherit an IRA? That has a very different tax situation than if you inherit a CD from the bank. So those are things that we need to talk about first. And then again, like, why pay off your mortgage if you have these other issues that could be addressed in a different way? So it's a very individual decision to make. There's no such thing as like, if you go online, everybody should do this. And I had a woman come up to me I gave a talk to our bar association not too long ago, and she said she went to one of those free steak dinners where the broker who was trying to sell annuities or whatever said everybody should convert all of their pre-tax IRAs and 401ks to Roth IRAs. And that is crazy. I would never suggest that. And I've got we'll go into it next, but sometimes that isn't the best. I don't ever say everybody should do this, and I know Amanda doesn't say everybody should do
Yeah, it
this.
sounds
Um,
really irresponsible.
yeah, it's negligent is what it is. It's
Mhm.
unprofessional, and that's why it's important to get to know your client and answer questions specifically for your client.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I think those are all great points. And then moving on to point number two, we were talking about how important it is to be proactive. Um, Instead of waiting until you're about to retire, maybe
Hmm.
think about it, a little bit more in advance.
Yeah. I get a lot of examples of that. Like, I started taking Social Security last year at the age of 62. Like, why? You've got $1 million in IRA assets. There's no reason for you to touch your Social Security yet. So, I get that a lot. Like, don't take your Social Security early. You're shooting yourself in the foot when there's no reason for that. That's something we should talk about before you do it. I paid
Mm.
off my mortgage. I inherited $100,000. I paid off my mortgage. I'm like that's something I wish we had talked about. Or we have clients, Amanda and I were just talking about people who inherit an IRA and they get like, a random email from the brokerage firm telling them like, click this button, and they go and distribute the entire thing. And you have to pay taxes on all that. And that was probably not the right way to do it. There are rules and there are options, and you need to explore those before you push the button. Um,
Mhm.
try to think
And
of,
people at the bank or the brokerage house can't give you advice
yeah.
based on your situation.
And sometimes they give you bad advice. Like, if they don't
Yeah.
know you at all, they have no business telling you
Mhm.
what to do or making a
Yeah.
suggestion.
Yeah.
Um, so
And I
yeah,
would say you have to be careful, and even if they do give you advice, sometimes getting a second opinion can really be
absolutely.
helpful
Yeah.
before
Like I said,
doing anything. Yeah.
yeah, if somebody gives you advice without asking you any other questions, that's not good advice. It can't be.
Yeah.
Because they don't know you and they need to know what your financial situation is before making suggestions. And the other point is that once you come to us after you've done something, I hear that a lot. I started taking Social Security. I started doing this. I started doing this. And oftentimes there's no way to backpedal it. That's what you're stuck with that. If you get to us fast enough, sometimes there are things we can do. Say completely distribute an IRA you shouldn't have. If you talk to us within 60 days, we might be able to fix it. Um, but there's a lot of rules for that. Sometimes we don't hear about it till the end of the tax year, and by then it's too late. Just there are lots and lots of rules, unfortunately. I think it's incredibly unfair as well. But speaking to somebody who knows those rules, like us, could save you a small fortune and a lot of headache and a lot of stress. So I always push clients to talk to me before they do, but don't start a business until we've talked about it. Don't distribute money until we've talked about it. Don't pay off a mortgage till we've talked about it.
Mm, yeah.
I had clients recently who went out and bought a car for like $45,000 with an 8.5% interest rate, and they have a large taxable savings from an inheritance they got. And I was like, why? No, so they already paid the loan fees and everything, but it made more sense to me for us to pay it off and have them repay themselves. There's just so much you can do. And the more account types you have and the more proactive you are, the more options we have. And believe it or not, we think that's fun. I know it's overwhelming for some clients or frustrating or scary, but we kind of get a kick out of it. That's the way
Yeah.
our crazy minds work. So I often get, I'm so sorry to bother you. I have a question. I'm like, no, please, that's what we're here for. And we enjoy doing that. And it gives us
Yeah.
a lot of satisfaction to get ahead of an issue and be able to do it right initially and not have fixing problems. I tell all my clients this: fixing a problem or a mistake or whatever is so much harder than figuring it out ahead of time.
Mhm. And I think a lot of people, they do get emotional about money, or there's psychological issues with it
Yeah.
that can really, I'm not, it distorts decision making.
Hmm.
Um, and I think having a third party or a financial advisor like us come in, who can be a little more clinical, look at it in the big picture,
Yeah,
can really
we're much
be,
more dispassionate about it. We don't get upset about it. We don't, I mean, I rarely if ever hang up the phone and go, oh my gosh. It's normally like, okay, what do I got to do about this? Like, how can I fix this? And there's
yeah,
often ways of fixing things, like I said, and some are more painful than others. But the best way to do it is like, hey, we're thinking about doing X, Y, and Z. Can we schedule an appointment and talk about this? Like, yeah, please, let's do that.
yeah, yeah. Um, okay, and then from moving on, I have as next is a lot of people who are not preparing for death properly.
Yeah.
Um, that's one we see all the time.
Hmm.
We get that it's very difficult to do, but if you're not prepared, it can really create a lot of difficulty for your loved ones.
Hmm. Yeah, it's
Difficulty is putting it lightly.
yeah, if you think about all the rules that are in place while you're alive or healthy and able to make decisions and how overwhelming that feels. Now imagine that with a loved one or whoever is trying to help you out with things when you're not doing well. It is very, very hard. And I've had several clients who don't reach out or do anything or don't talk to their kids or until, quite frankly, it is too late. They are incapacitated in mentally or physically. Um, you know, illness changes people's personalities. Um, I always tell people to plan when you're well, because you have no idea the version of you that's going to emerge when you become diagnosed with cancer, or you're going through treatments, or you're on god-awful medication, or you're comatose half the day because of whatever you're going through. It is very difficult. And if it's not done properly before death and those things can't be gotten ahead of, it causes a whole lot of stress, because then you might have the probate process involved and the brokerage company is asking for X, Y, and Z and you don't have them or whatever. And it's expensive. The other part of I talked about earlier, fixing things after a mistake has been made. If you don't get ahead of something, it's not necessarily a mistake, but it becomes much more expensive. Um, and so getting ahead of things and doing documents when you're well, as unpleasant as it is to think about your own demise, it is so much easier. And I use the example of my own mother. I lost my mother 10 years ago this year. She died of ALS. We never once talked about her death after her diagnosis, and we didn't have to because I always say she was my best client. She did everything I told her to do. We had all of her documents taken care of. We had all of her accounts set up properly. And so when she passed, it was a very simple matter of just closing everything out. And my sister and I got along and we both knew what was coming and it was fine. And I've had other people who just recently, we had a client whose mother had a brain tumor and her personality was completely different. She was completely paranoid. She didn't trust anyone. She thought her daughter was trying to steal all her money. And it was, so you're dealing with the death of a loved one or a pending death of a loved one, which is just horrible as a caregiver or as a loved one. And you're also trying to figure this out, which makes you feel horrible. You have this a tremendous amount of guilt. Um, it's just really, really hard. So
Yeah,
I tell people, like, as unpleasant as it is now, it's so much less unpleasant than it will be later if you put it off.
yeah, yeah. Those are
We did
all
a whole
great.
webinar on it too. We've got a really good webinar, I think, on our website all about death because we had a couple of years ago where we had a lot of deaths and we were dealing with a lot of clients who are going through this. And so we did a specific webinar on preparing for
Mhm.
death.
Yeah, we can link that in the show notes. So look for that. And then finally, everybody's favorite topic is working on your budget. Um, I don't think it's you can only beat a dead horse so many times, right?
It never ends. Again, this is my 26th year and I talk about it all the time. So you've got some clients who budget to death. They look at their budget every other day. Like, that's too much. You're stressing yourself out. And when I say looking at your budget, I'm a big fan of Excel spreadsheets. When I was 16 years old and got my first job, we didn't have Excel, but I had notebook paper and I made a spreadsheet that looked like a spreadsheet. So it's one
Yeah.
thing I've always done. And I've given my template to a lot of people who are just like, can you send me your budget template? And I'm happy to do that. It's very simple. It's just a spreadsheet where you put all of your expenses at the top, all of your income at the bottom, the difference at the bottom. And it helps you, for those of you who have a lot of financial anxiety, it is, I mean, you can look at it twice a month, look at it around the first, whenever you get paid and whenever, you've got your due dates in there, and it takes a lot of that anxiety out of the picture, I think. Um, just seeing things on paper or seeing numbers added together and just seeing a bottom line rather than just laying in bed and worrying about it, like, oh, I got to pay bills tomorrow, I'm getting paid in 2 days, what do I have to do with this, or work living, and a lot of people live paycheck to paycheck, unfortunately. And having that written budget takes an awful lot of that off your brain. And I've got clients who
Mhm.
are like, how can I make this much money and still not have any money? And what I usually tell them is go back 2 months, go through all your credit card statements and your bank statements and create a budget. Look and see where all your money went. I did that with a client a handful of years ago, and I remember it's one of those ones that sticks in my head. And they were like, we're spending $400 a month at Starbucks. I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's a car payment, a student loan payment, some other thing. And,
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
don't need to spend $400 a month at Starbucks. Buy a good coffee maker and move on. So just when you're not looking at those numbers, they can seem overwhelming, and you might find that you're putting a whole lot more either in savings or on unnecessary debts than you should be.
Yeah. Yeah. I personally I like to budget by thinking of my goals kind of in advance. Like, okay, this summer I want to go on vacation. I know it's gonna cost X dollars. Set this money aside now,
Hmm.
or every month. And then the money I have left over, after I've budgeted for those specific things, that's like my disposable income.
Yeah.
Um,
My spreadsheet's pretty complicated, but it's because I have buckets for everything. I've got bills I have to pay, but I also have a bucket for, like, I don't pay my property taxes or my homeowner's insurance through a mortgage, so I have to pay that out of
mm,
pocket.
yeah.
And so I have a different account that I set aside a certain amount every month so that when those bills come in, I just pay it. And I have a vacation bucket, and I have just like a house repairs bucket. My house is from 1940. There's always something to do. So I have a home repair bucket, and I have, all those things, but it's something I'm really good at. It's easy for me to do that. I know that's tougher for other people, but we've done lots of talks in the past where we think about them as like cookie jars. And I think
Yeah.
that's really
Hmm.
helpful. You think about it as like a separate jar, and you don't necessarily have to have a different account. It's just a line on a spreadsheet. Um, Maybe we need to do a budget spreadsheet webinar. Ooh, we could do that. That'd be kind of fun. Well, we think it's fun because we like spreadsheets, but um, if we had some interest, we could do that.
Yeah, yeah, I think that could be good. That could definitely be good for especially for some of our younger clients who are just getting started, to have a good foundation to work from, I think could be very helpful.
Yeah, I've got a very simple spreadsheet set up for my son who had opened a Roth IRA for the first time 2 months ago. It's a very proud moment for
Yeah.
me. So he's got lists for, he's paid as a 1099, so he's got like a tax, column, and he's got how much is he going to put in spending and how much is he going to put in his long-term savings and how much is going into his Roth. So when I told him
Mm.
he was opening a Roth, he's like, "Well, what's that for?" Like, he's like, "I have all these accounts." But I feel like if I start him young and he
Yes,
doesn't know any
yes.
different, then he'll stick with it. That's my hope anyway.
Yeah. He already has so many advantages having you help him, right, Danielle?
Yeah, yeah. My youngest, he was
Yeah.
like getting all stressed one day about how he was going to do his taxes. I was laughing so hard. It's like, because and I'm like, buddy, you got a shoe in. You're
Hmm.
okay.
You don't really have to do them yourself. Right.
That's very
Oh, he's
funny.
so funny.
Hmm.
Um, okay, yeah, I think those were all great things that we see all the time. Hopefully our listeners learned some valuable takeaways from today. Um, don't you think, Danielle?
I think so.
I think we hit everything.
Like,
I know, so we
I
have to
feel
have you. Oh, go ahead.
I was say this is nothing we haven't said before, and I just feel like the
Yeah.
more we say it and the more people hear it, the less overwhelming some of these things will feel.
Yeah, and I think we need to have you on more often. And I think if
Yay.
there were any of those 5 things we went through that resonated with a listener who wants to hear more about it or how to approach it, because any of those we could dive way deeper into. Like this
Oh
was
yeah, we could talk and
surface
talk and talk.
level.
You'll want, yeah,
So
we could go on
yeah,
forever.
yeah. So please let us know if you're interested in that. So
Yeah. Well, thanks for having
okay.
me.
Thanks, Danielle.
All right, bye.
Bye.
That will do it for this episode of Connecting the Dollars. Nothing discussed in this episode should be considered legal, financial, or tax advice. If you like what you heard, please subscribe for more at Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your content. When you do, please give us a rating and a review. To see the links we mentioned in our show, along with other great Propel Financial Advisors content, go to connectingthedollars.com. You can find our past episodes there and subscribe to our newsletter. And if you're still here because you have a general question, you can email us directly at info@connectingthedollars.com. Or, if you're interested in working with us, click the Schedule a Consultation button on our website. Thank you for listening.